ぱりレベルが上がってくるとさ、もう求めるレベルがだんだん上がってくるから、日本語全然ダメじゃんってなるじゃん。
Welcome to the lazyfluency podcast, where we have casual conversations switching between English and Japanese so that you can learn from and with us along the way. I'm Joey.
And I'm Yami.
And the topic for the day is language slumps. But before we get into that, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and or drop a review whatever platform you're listening on. We appreciate the support. And with that out of the way, language slumps. What do you do when you stop feeling like you're progressing in language learning? Today we're talking about language slumps, and this was a requested topic from one of our MVP commenters, Oddity. First off, I guess this applies to both English and Japanese, but obviously I'll be talking about Japanese in general, and I feel like many experiences that people have with Japanese. But the first thing I will say about the language slump situation is to acknowledge that Japanese is hard. I mean, language learning is hard in general, but for the majority of English native speakers or people who aren't Korean basically or Chinese, Japanese is considered by many, including the American government, to be the most difficult language to learn in terms of time put into it. There's something called the Foreign Language Service Institute, and they evaluate how long it takes soldiers to learn certain languages, how many classroom hours. And for Japanese, it is not only ranked in the highest category, but also has a special asterisk on top of it to show that it is considerably more difficult than others in the same category. It is the only language or category 4 language with an asterisk on it, above Arabic, Korean, and Chinese. So that's the first thing I want to say. I mean, do you have any thoughts right off the bat with language slumps or any personal experiences with feeling like you're not improving with English specifically?
いやー、もうね、聞かれる前に、もう聞かれたら即答で、もう、オールタイムだよね。もう、常に。なんか、最近なんか、結構忙しくて、やっぱり、英語に触れる時間が少なかったりね。っていうのもあって、病院でローテーションしてる時とかってもう周りがさ、日本語だから、やっぱり、言語っていうのは、その言語が環境にある。surrounded 日本語が出てこない。囲まれてないと、やっぱり、上達はしないし、そういう脳になっていかないから、やっぱりそういう環境に自分を置くことが大事だと思うんだけど、でもそういう環境に今自分置けてないし、あと、これはすごい、スペシフィックな、なんて言うんだろうね。問題っていうか、ストラゴなんだけど、私、今ご存知の通り、オープンイヤーのね、こんな感じのね、ヘッドセットを使ってるわけ。でさ、移動の時間にさ、やっぱりポッドキャストとかだったりさ、聞いたりできるじゃん。ね、それで自分を、英語に、浸すみたいな感じできるんだけど、でもこれオープンイヤーだからさ、聞こえないわけよ。周りのガタンゴトンとかさ、車、バスとかでもさ、周りの音がすごくて全然聞こえなくて。で、音量を大きくすれば聞こえるっちゃ聞こえるんだけど、でもそれするとさ、耳に悪いし、頭も痛くなるから、やっぱりちょっと、なんて言うんだろうね。聞けないってなっちゃって、で、最近あんまり、ポッドキャストとかも聞けてないかなっていうのが問題なんだよね。うん。
So, I think maybe that is, for sure that is related to a language slump. But in there, I feel like there's kind of maybe a guilt of not consuming enough English.
そう、guilty もある。
How I feel about the language slump is it feels like you're putting in the work, but you're not seeing the progress. And maybe that's probably associated as well with a language slump where someone feels like, hey, I could be doing more, I could be listening to more, I could be writing more, reading more. And then that manifests itself into thinking like, the reason I'm in a slump is because I'm not putting enough work. There's a lot of slumps in Japanese, and I actually have a lot of thoughts on this. But the first thing I will say is, in my personal experience learning Japanese, there's this idea that the first time I heard it, it was from Steve Krashen. Is that it? He calls it an inverted hockey stick, where there's like at the very beginning, basically it's like if you imagine an inverted hockey stick, there's a very steep incline at the very beginning, and then it kind of
頭打ちになっちゃうってやつね、棒グラフで。
Yeah, exactly. And it becomes more gradual, and the curve or the line becomes less steep as it goes out. And it's supposed to describe the kind of how it feels to learn a language, where immediately when you don't know much, knowing anything is a huge percentage of the things you know. But then the more you know, the more each word becomes a smaller percentage of what you know, and therefore feels like you're learning less. Even though in terms of raw vocabulary, you are learning more. I guess it'd be like one of those things about, what is it? Diminishing returns. So yeah, a concept of diminishing returns. And to some extent, I do believe that is true. But in my personal experience with Japanese, I believe the more, it's not apt. There's not really a great analogy for it. I feel it is a sequence of consecutive hockey sticks. And each progressive hockey stick is... So yeah, so imagine you have the first incline and then it goes steady. And then the next incline is more gradual, and then a hockey sticks out again. And there's one that's even more gradual. Like its steep part is even less gradual than the one before it. And so I wrote down some examples here of what I mean here. But so we have the very beginning of you don't know any Japanese and you are a beginner, where I feel like one of the main problems people have is this problem of not being able to output, is the word, is like not being able to speak, not being able to write. And eventually when you, like the first thing where you really start to feel progress is where you're able to like to make conversation to some degree, where that's like, you know what I'm saying, your success, you feel progress. But then the second form becomes, for example, let's say when you start to get to intermediate slumps, which is, and this is something an Oddity talked about specifically with her experience, where she has trouble maintaining the right form of Japanese, whether it be polite Japanese or casual Japanese, or, you know what I'm saying? Like,
もともと知ってたけど、それがわからなくなっちゃうってこと？
No. As in she understands it, but when she's trying to speak, she'll switch. So it'll be like saying, なんとかです, then this next sentence saying like, なんとか, and not saying, you know what I'm saying, です, or it'd be like,
どうなんだよね、それ
saying あります and then saying ある. That does happen with natural Japanese, where people switch.
あれでしょ、途中でさ、敬語使おうとしてるけど、途中でなぜかタメ語になっちゃうみたいな感じでしょ？
That's actually a very interesting thing that I've been wanting to like research more, because there's so many situations where it's not only futsu, but it would be weird to not, you know what I'm saying, to not change. And I feel like there's almost like a dance that happens in Japanese where you're trying to be more playful, you'll go to tamego for a second, and then you can go back into like more formal keigo. But anyways, at least, but I think the problem, go ahead.
その現象あるじゃん。それね、私ちょうど昨日経験したんだよ。何回か経験して、やっぱり同じ学年でさ、やっぱりちょっと先輩みたいな人がいるのね。ちょっと、repeat the same year みたいなね。で、その人に対して、まあ一応先輩だから、まあ、敬語を最初は使うっちゃ使うんだけど、でも途中でやっぱり、なんか、慣れてくるっていうか、まあ、仲良くなってきて、なんか波長があってくると、普通にポロッともう普通にタメ語とか出ちゃうし、あと昨日なんか友達で日本語のテストをしてほしい、ね、日本語のプロフィシェンシーがどれぐらいなのかのテストしてほしいみたいなので、私が敬語で話してほしいみたいな感じだったのね。あっちも敬語で話したいから。だけど私は敬語で話してたんだけど、途中でやっぱりなぜかわかんないけど変わっちゃったっていうね。なんなら私の方が敬語話せないみたいな。そう。
I mean, I really think, realistically speaking, there's a way more complex functioning happening with keigo and tamego, where you're almost jousting to move people into certain place. Like if you subconsciously feel more friendly with somebody, you want to be able to bring it to tamego, you know what I'm saying? And so I feel like there's like this verbal jousting going back, where you'll slip in some tamego and then be like, let me feel the waters here. So, but I mean, without going too, I definitely think this is like interesting, but I there's a lot I want to cover and like ask you about as well. And so I'll just say, like, with Oddity's journey, one of her problems is maintaining the same form of politeness. But then I have like another version above that, when you're able to, like, you know what I'm saying, you're able to speak maybe comfortably, maybe have conversational Japanese. Oh, but it turns out actually Japanese is a bunch of different skills, because there's writing, and even to this day, like the gap, like I'd say like writing's like the least common thing, and I can write, but like my handwriting sucks, like my actual, like how it looks. My English handwriting isn't pretty too. Yeah, it's like I have the understanding of like obviously grammar and all that, and like write all that, but my actual handwriting is just not great. I mean, it isn't great in English, and so I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. And I've never cared too much about the handwriting. But at the same time, I'm like, I wish I had prettier handwriting. And so but anyway, I don't know if that'd be in the slump thing because it's not as helpful. But what I will say is like, some people who took Japanese, and this is very common, I feel like I've met people from many different colleges, all the way through like 4 years of college or 3 years of college, still can find themselves coming out of it and not being able to read like a manga without pulling up a dictionary for every sentence. and that is definitely, I feel like, a very frustrating experience. And especially reading I feel like is one of the biggest gaps, or sorry, the slump feelings in Japanese, where like it takes forever to feel. And like in my personal experience, like it was just a lot of time put in before I got to a place. And I don't know when exactly it happened, but it happened at some point where I finally felt like I didn't have to have like a dictionary beside me. But I remember feeling it multiple times where I felt like I had an upgrade. Like I felt like I was getting better in Japanese, and then I'd pull up a book, and then I'd just be like, dude, why am I pulling up a dictionary? Like, what's going on here?
もうそれ分かっ、それさ、一つの理由としてはさ、やっぱりレベルが上がるごとにさ、どんどん難しい文章の本とかを読むようになっていくからさ、まあ初めはさ、絵本みたいなさ、もう全部ひらがなとか、まあたまにちょっと小学生ぐらいの漢字が出てくるようなやつを読んでると、まあ漢字とか勉強していけばさ、これ全部わかるみたいな感じだけどさ、やっぱりレベルが上がってくるとさ、もう求めるレベルがだんだん上がってくるから、読む本だとかもレベル上がって、それこそ銀河英雄伝説だったりさ、あんな本私読めないよ。だからそういう本を読み始めると、自分なんだ、日本語全然ダメじゃんってなるじゃん。から絶対それはあるよ。
I mean, I will say, and I'm aware this actually exists in my native language. As I was tutoring somebody earlier today, like a kid, like a younger kid, and he brought up a word I'd never heard of before, which is like a type of worm. And so with English, I don't care about it. No, it was a type of worm in English. I can't remember what it was called. Mopena worm. It was like a cool African worm. I'm like, I've never heard that term before.
Like
and when I hear it in English, and when I'm like, I don't think anything about it. And I think I've talked about this specifically phenomenon before. But in Japanese, when I read like a children's book or something, somebody selects a children's book and I encounter a word I don't know, I'm like, I'm an idiot, stupid. Like, this is literally a kindergarten book in hiragana and I don't know the word. And so obviously there's so many that you'll never know any of them. But I do want to go into, so those are just some of my feelings of like ways I personally felt like slumps with Japanese in different like stages. But I kind of want to go into countermeasures, because that was the question, is Oddity was asking, how do you deal with them when you feel a slump? And here are some of my thoughts. And I mean, I guess you might have your own thoughts, but I'll introduce some, like I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I'll try to break it up and introduce it and then see what you think. So the first thing, before we go into a countermeasure, or maybe this is a form of countermeasure, is I'm all about making every part of the process of what you're doing intrinsically enjoyable. If it is not enjoyable or rewarding to do by itself, then you're going to be feeling more set back by perceived like lack of progress or other things like that. So something I told somebody recently when they were talking about wanting to like be optimal about their Japanese learning because they don't want to have wasted time, and I asked them a question like, do you think that you want to be like, have you ever considered whether or not you are being optimal about your interactions with your friends because you don't want to have wasted time? You know what I'm saying? Like people don't view things they enjoy intrinsically, like their friends or familiar relationships, as something that they need to optimize, or else it has been wasted if they don't reach a certain goal. And I feel like with Japanese as well, a lot of people have these like almost these goals that actually, or these ways of thinking about learning Japanese and optimization that actually hinder their progress on top of that, but also make the whole thing less enjoyable because they want to frame it as something that needs to be optimized, and there's some concrete goal they want to reach, even for a lot of people when it's very abstract. So I'm just saying, like, if you frame every part of the process enjoyable and like it's something you would do aside from any form of progress, like for some people watching anime, or for some people like running, like they're not thinking about running because they want to be an Olympic runner, they just do running because they like running, then I feel like that's a very first thing that it can reduce this feeling of being a slump in the very first place. What are your impressions on that? So I'm saying like for English.
そのゴールを、まあ、なんて言うんだろう。楽しむっていうことにすれば別にスランプは感じないってことでしょ
Well, I'm saying it'll maybe reduce the feeling of frustration from being in a slump. Because it's like at the end of the day, for example, if I'm doing homework I don't like, and then I feel on top of that, I feel like I'm not improving, I'm going to stop doing that homework. But if my action is, for example, watching anime, and regardless of whether or not I'm improving or not improving, I still want to watch anime. Shout out to the awesome anime season that's coming up right now. Then regardless of what my motivation is, I will continue doing it. I will continue to stick to the process. But yeah, go ahead.
それなんかこれさ、スランプスをまあなんていうの、そのまあできるだけ少なくするっていうのにも関係あるし、その言語を学ぶまあモチベーションを保つためにも、そのやっぱり楽しいことをするべきっていうのはあるよね。で、やっぱりさ、なんて言うんだろう。あんまりにも高い目標を設定しがちじゃん、やっぱり。なんだ、JLPT N1 を今年の12月までに取るとかさ、結構、なんて言うんだろう。ビッグに行っちゃいがちじゃん。でもやっぱりさ、なんて言うんだろう。なんて言うんだろうね。具体的なゴールをセットすることは結構まあ大事なんだよね。その方がまあ達成感ねとかね、今やってる感っていうのは出るし、まああとなんだろうね、まあそうね、出るからまあいいと思うんだけど、あんまりビッグにしちゃうとね、こんなのもできないなっていう、もう自分をね責めちゃうから。まあ、小さいゴールにしつつ、しかもなんか楽しむっていうことをメインに目標を設定すればまあいいんじゃないですか?
I mean, I definitely agree with that. But with what I will say before that is to establish setting a goal is great, especially if it's concrete and achievable.
そうなんだよね。
And having multiple long-term and short-term goals. But the thing is, those goals only matter if you actually care about those goals. So the thing I would recommend before goal setting, before you even determine what your goals are, if you have an idea what those goals are, and this is something that might be able to help Oddity, because for me, I didn't realize in the moment, but I had done this already in my head, which is establish a vision. And this is maybe, and I hate this because people who like, a lot of people I do not like the rise and grind mindset thing. This is something that they'll say, but I think is very, very helpful, which is like establish a vision in your ideal world and future where you can do whatever you want. And in that future, how are you using Japanese? Is it like your dream, like you never thought about it, but you're really like, hey, I realize I actually want to move to Japan. Or I realize that I actually want to achieve this in Japan. Or I want to work in this industry in Japan, or I want to do this thing or whatever in Japan. For example, for me, something that I realized like have been motivators for me is one of my goals. I really want to start a specific game store. I have a bunch of notes in Japan. Like I really want to do that. I also like things with like this channel, the main channel, lazyfluency, something I always wanted to do. I mentioned I had another YouTube channel. Still have the other YouTube channel. And so I've always been interested in YouTube, but specifically like with Japanese content has been something I've always wanted to do. Also, I've always been wanted, and there's still things that, obviously the game store I haven't achieved, but like interviews in Japan are always something I wanted to do, as well as some other small things like I want to take a Japanese keigo class, not because I want to actually work in a Japanese company, but because I just, like, I'm a weirdo. I just think it'd be really fun to like get really good at like business keigo. And just drop it randomly sometimes in conversation. I don't know, Amy, if you've done this before, but basically the idea is you're kind of being real with yourself and saying, okay, like what is the dream? You know what I'm saying? What is the vision? And then once you have that, then goals become a lot more, like they actually become more rewarding to achieve and more motivational. So if you say, oh, I want to do this and I want to work, like, and this is something I actually want to achieve, get where I want to be, well, then the JLPT N2 or JLP N1 suddenly not only become like, oh, I can set these goals and it'll force me to do it. You actually have a reason to want to achieve it. You're like, I need this because it'll increase my chances of being able to get in this certain position. So before the goals, I recommend establishing a vision. I don't know if you've ever done this with English before. I didn't really do it overtly, but I realized that I was doing it subconsciously.
やっぱそうね、最近やっぱビジョンっていうのをあんまり持ってなかったからね、これを参考にビジョンを立てていきます。 あとなんだ、なんて言うとしたんだっけ。やっぱりそう、ビジョンを持つことってさ、なんだろう。ある程度、なんていうの、リワーディングシステムは脳のさ、報酬系っていうの。でやっぱりこれが欲しいって考えてるとさ、それを、得た時にさ、なんかドーパミンとかいっぱい入れるじゃん。だから、それでもっとやりたくなるっていうのは、それは、メカニズム的にはすごくいいことだよねって思った今、それ聞いてて。
I just remembered that there's a line from Dr. Stone called 欲しいが科学 which is all like scientific invention and comes from wanting and desire. It's like a phrase.
だから、やっぱりビジョンを持つことっていうのは大事だね。しかも、やっぱりまあどうなんだろう、ちっちゃいゴールをなんていうの設定するっていうのもいいけどね。なんだやっぱり。
Well, the way oh, go ahead.
いい
I was saying the way I like to view setting small goals, which I do think are important, or small rewards. Like, for example, a small goal could be like finishing a specific book series or something like that. But I think something that's equally important as setting small goals is having concrete ways to view or track the progress that you've made. Whether for some people it'd be like the note apps that you use, like Anki or whatever, and some people like the dopamine of seeing numbers go up, or for other people it might be specific things that they want to achieve, whether it be like I want to have talked to, I don't know, let's say somebody's using like a conversation app or something, or language exchange app, like they want to talk to 50 people or something, like some way that you can actually look back and see, hey, at the beginning of this thing I did not do this thing, and now it doesn't matter if I don't feel it. I know like I read, you know what I'm saying, I read all of this or all of that, and so that so that you can actually like look at something objective to help overcome your subjective feelings of not improving. There's this notion, I think something Oddity said, that I understand where it's coming from, but I also like, I don't know if I fully agree with it, which is like language like goes, assuming that you're like consistently learning or whatever, that language isn't like a steady line of improvement up. And what I will say is language might not feel like a steady line of improvement up, but I do believe that if you're consistently like interacting with everything, like you are improving whether or not you know it. And one of the things that I think with Japanese that I noticed the most, and I maybe even noticed to this day, is I can come off like in certain situations like extremely, like to my personal evaluation, others like I feel extremely fluent at times. I'm like, wow, I'm just killing. I'm not even thinking. But then I'll go and do a topic that I've never gone into before, and it's not like I completely fall apart, but I'm like, I'm now having to think, and I'm like, and obviously this happens in English, but I'm less like judgmental about it as well.
それはだってしょうがないんじゃない？だってそういうさ、専門的なとかさ、あんま知らない領域になるとやっぱりってなるじゃん。だって私もなんだっけ？
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it is natural.
覚えてるなんかなんだっけな、その CS の人たちがなんかその CS のこと話してて、私は全然知らないからさ、私の英語マジでダメだって思ったもん。全然 CS 知らないし、それもしかも英語だったしっていうのもあって、ダメだって思っちゃったからね。
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I think when people say like language isn't like you know what I'm saying, you're not always improving, I think what's actually happening, assuming that you're being consistent with whatever your plan is you are evaluating one part of your language that you never saw before and comparing it to some other thing that you're much more comfortable with. So let's say somebody's really good at like basic conversation, introducing themselves, talking about their hobbies, and then they start talking about like astrophysics with some dude or something. Their language ability did not get worse because they're not as fluent with this conversation about astrophysics. It's that they haven't had any conversation with astrophysics. So now they're comparing this domain of Japanese to something that they've had much more experience with. But I do want to cover. Oh, go ahead.
なんか日本語でさ、やっぱ私政治とか経済とかマジで何も知らないからさ、日本語でそういう会話されても私の日本語プラス知識のなさに多分ね、自分が嫌いになりそう。
I mean, I definitely will say yeah, I don't think there are many Japanese people who are strong at politics.
Yeah, man, some people are so yo. Some people are still so.
I would love to meet them. I would love to talk politics with the Japanese person. I'm not even kidding, dude. It's just like it doesn't exist. I've never met anybody who has even a passing interest or even knowledge, honestly. Even like older people, it's like, you know what I'm saying? They just have like the vibes. It's like, which is the same thing in America, but it's like vibes based. But I will say is I do have some more advice. And so the other one is, and this is, I think, a good one. And I know this isn't possible. And I think for oddity, this might be a little more difficult. But I highly recommend bringing other people along your journey, whether that people be online or that be like a book club or like your friends who maybe are not be learning Japanese. In my case, none of my friends are learning Japanese, but you know, if you have any, or any other like social event, or for example, if you know there's a Japanese club in your area or some sort of social group anywhere, like having yourself have to go to some other place where there's some form of accountability, even if it's not like a concrete form of accountability. Like it's just something that you have to show up and interact with people. That alone will allow you to stick with something way more, even through times that feel more frustrating.
それはさ、なんていうの、オンラインとかでもいいの？そういう、まあ。
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, the whole reason this podcast, I'm sure you mentioned this, the whole reason this podcast started is because I was using a language exchange app.
まあそうか、そうで。
That,
そうですね。
Yeah.
完全に忘れてました。すみません。
And at the very least, even though I think we both engage with English and Japanese frequently, just for many reasons, like I'm currently on an anime binge at the moment, catching up with anime.
20は見るんでしょ？
Yeah, well, これから。
頭割れるわ。
But anyways, what I was saying is like at the very least, doing an episode every week is a way that's like inevitable.
いや、そうなんだよね。ね、本当にね、これはね、毎週だってなんかなんていうの、その週、私にとっては、まあ、英語に触れてようが触れてないだろうがさ、なんか、強制的に喋らされるからさ、やっぱりその週あんまり触れてないと、まあ、ミドルセクションで、本当にラスティーになってくるし、その週、例えば、まあ、外国人の友達とかと、なんかそういう喋れる機会とか結構あったら、スムーズにいけたやんとかなるから、ね、ありがとうございますね。毎週やらせていただいて、本当に感謝しております。
Yeah, and I do have I guess another piece of advice, and it's to mix things up. So a lot of the time, I feel like if you're feeling when I hear like a slump, I sense or would like to assume that there's a sense of frustration happening with something, whether it be like the way you're currently engaging with Japanese, because you're engaging with something that inherently makes you frustrated. And obviously sometimes you just kind of have to stick it out to eventually kind of reap the reward. But if it's so frustrating to the point that you're questioning if you're improving or not, I think it can be beneficial to either mix up the method or change or adjust the difficulty of what you're engaging with. This is something, there's a concept of like surasura yomi or surasura yomu. I can't remember, which is like effortless reading, basically. And I remember there was something called like, was it Teragoya Nihongo?
Terakoya?
Terakoya? Oh yeah, Terakoya. Which is like where the whole point was they would only give you things that for you were easy to read. Because the feeling of being stuck can be inherently frustrating. And even though you like to think, but the more things that I don't know, the more I'm learning. That's just actually not the case a lot of the times. And sometimes maybe if you're feeling a slump, it might mean that you are saying what Amy was saying earlier, where you, because of your improvement, you want to engage with more difficult material to your own detriment, basically. And so that's something I would also recommend if you are feeling a slump. And I do have one last thought, which is if you feel like, so you have no vision. You have no goals. You find everything is frustrating, and you don't have anybody that can help you along the way. And if all that you've gone through all that, I would ask that you do some introspection and establish like where is this feeling? Because when I hear like the frustration in there, and if you realize that hey, there's no, and I think I mentioned this one before, like if there's no reason that you think objectively that you don't enjoy learning Japanese or you find the whole thing frustrating, you don't have any goals related to Japanese, then I definitely would at least suggest some introspection, or because, like I said, Japanese I'm saying the journey with Japanese might be a proxy from some other issue that, and I'm saying, like, you might be tying your self-worth to Japanese, realizing that you don't even like Japanese in the first place. So I don't think this is the case necessarily with Oddity's situation, as she talked about learning Japanese because she's really into anime, specifically Cowboy Bebop. So don't think this is the case here, but I would like to at the very least mention it. Like, there's nobody, you know what I'm saying? If it's that bad, you don't have to learn Japanese. It doesn't make you a failure. People have very different goals with language learning, and as we said, there's no end goal, realistically speaking. Like, there's you can't be perfect. Nobody's perfect. Live in what is it, Hannah Montana? You know what? It's a generational thing. I don't know what to say. But yeah, that's all I got. I mean, do you have anything else?
いや、完璧主義はやっぱ良くないよねっていうのは多分あるよね。
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's a whole episode on perfectionism. But yeah. Thanks for the topic suggestion, Oddity. 戻りました。
We are back.
今回はあゆみのブックタイムじゃなくて、ジョイのブックタイムの話しよう。
ブーブー。
まあ、ブックタイムというか、
ブーブー。
まあ、アニメの話とブックの話があります。まず、その本棚に並んでる本というのは、狼と香辛料。まあ、今、ポッドキャストだけ聞いてる人は多分見えないかもしれないけど、一応、多分、狼と香辛料の話を多分3回、4回ぐらいしたことあると思うんだけど、それは初めての日本で買ったラノベ。で、アニメも多分、なんだろうね、8年前とか、そのアニメ見た、狼と香辛料のアニメ。めっちゃ好きで、今の時点では多分、7冊ぐらい、読んだことある。
What's the English title, by the way? I forgot.
Spice and Wolf. Spice and Wolf.
Spice and Wolf.
Spice and Wolf. そう。本当に、まあ、同じだけど逆。
香辛料と狼。
香辛料と狼。そう。でも、2日というか、そう、2日だったと思うんだけど、なんかリメイクされるらしい。めっちゃ嬉しい、今日。
Is it the anime?
そう、アニメ。
It's not a movie.
アニメがリメイクされ、いや、テレビ、まあ、番組。
Okay.
めっちゃ嬉しくて、なんか、アニメに関しては、今までは、まあ、3つのシリーズが、なんか、すごく、まあ、リメイクというか、続編欲しかった。まあ、このリメイクは多分続編も来る、まあ、その可能性もあるんだけど、一応今の時点でリメイク。でもなんか、多分、なんと言うんだろうね。10年ぐらい、3つのシリーズのリメイクが欲しかった。その3つというのは、まず、春日。鈴宮の春日の憂鬱の、続編。めっちゃ好きで、まあ、今までリメイクされ、まあ、リメイクというか続編全然なしで、アニメだと。で、他のはスナッフ。それは、2018、19年、その続編と、完成編が出たからめっちゃ嬉しかった。で、今日、狼と香辛料、ついにリメイクされるのが、すごく気持ちいい。
So, is that show really popular in the Western world? Do people know that?
なんかアニメオタクは知ってる。で、アニメオタクはめっちゃ好き。多分、なんか私の、少女始末良子みたいな感じで、知ってる人は好きだけど、まあ、この狼と香辛料は、少女始末より人気だと思うんだけど、一応見てる人はめっちゃ好きで、そう、めっちゃ好きだけど、ほぼ多分 70% の人は見たことないけど、多分一応1回ぐらい聞いたことある。好きな人はめっちゃなんていうか、バカほどいつも、まあいいこと言ってるから。で、まあそれはいい話として、一応、狼と香辛料、小説や、まあラノベ、アニメを見てない人は、2024年の いつかわからないけど、ぜひ見てください。これを成功させたいんだから、成功しないと苦しくなるから。で、次の話は、私が、なんていう継続的に、なんか読みたいけど、なんていうか、その瞬間うまく続けられないんだけど、ついに銀河英雄伝説、その一巻終わった。
Wow. I think I will never achieve that. Like, I will give up at the first page. かな。
その最初のところと終わりの方は難しかったんだけど、真ん中ぐらいはまあ難しかったんだけど、ある程度できたって感じで、もちろんなんか継続的に読むことができたらもっと早く終わらせたかもしれないけど、その本読んでる時になんか今日この本読んで、明日狼と香辛料を読んで、で他の人、例えばまた同じ夢を見ていたとか、夜は短し歩けよ乙女、その問題がある。いつもなんか本始めると他の本読んでしたくなる。
Yeah, that happens. Yeah, I do that all the time. Like I was reading Think Clearly, if you remember.
So think feel clearly or just think clearly?
Yeah, I guess. And then like before that, I was reading this なんだっけ人生楽しんでる人のなんだっけ過ごし方みたいな。I forgot the Kabasawa.
People who enjoy. Oh yeah, so 覚えてる。
Yeah, like I have never finished a single book, which I want to fix. But yeah.
どういうこと？その一生。
I really like in like
finished never book. 最近っていう話？それとも一生全然
Yeah, in my life.
まだやってないってこと？
I mean, 違う like of course I have finished like children books, but like those kind of books like for adults, I think I have never finished. Yeah. I feel like I'm like ADHD.
ビデオゲームに関してはすごく同感できる。
Yeah.
ビデオゲームに関しては今多分8つのなんか私がすごく好きでやってた時、めっちゃこれは面白い。なんかエルデンリングもめっちゃ好きで、このなんかフィギュア見えないかもしれないけど、そのダークソウルのフィギュアも持ってるのに、まだ終わってない。
But for games, you don't want to finish the game, right? Because once you finish, you will complete every stage.
終わってほしくない。
Yeah, so that makes sense. But
アニメに関してはそういうこともある。無視しというシリーズ、その漫画並んでる。これは無視し。無視しでもアニメすごく好きで独特で、こういうなんか無視しを見ると、なんていうか、そういう雰囲気がめっちゃ好きで、なんか楽に死ねる。という感じがする。なんて言えばいいんだろうね。その見てると全部は大丈夫だ。なんか何もやらなくていい。で、それでそのアニメを終わらせたら、そのなんていうか薬飲めないから、なんていうか見たくない。
Okay.
好きすぎて見たくない逆に。なんかスタジオジブリに関しては同じことをやってる。なんかスタジオジブリの半分の映画しか見てないと思う。
What? That's what?
好きすぎてなんか見たら新しいなんか私が見てないスタジオジブリの映画がないからそのなんか事実が悲しすぎる。
No, they will release new like movies.
いや宮崎駿はそんななんかもう結構なんか80歳以上超えてるでしょ。
But they like someone will take over.
いやそれは違う。
Yeah. Oh, really?
宮崎駿の映画。いやそういうことじゃなくてスタジオジブリの私にとってその
You like him ね just himself
そう、まあディレクターとして監督としてまあ今日の話でしたジョイのブックタイム
ブーブ
ー来週あゆみのブックタイム戻るかもしれないでもオディが一応聞いたから今週はジョイのブックタイムでした。And we're back with the final section. And if you made to the final section, that means you send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com with a comment, question, language related, and or otherwise. And this week we had like 2.5 comments because one comment wasn't on the podcast channel, so I'm not entirely sure. But I'll respond to part of them. And the first one is from the person who made the recommendation for this week, which is Oddity. And it's about last episode, sort of. If most Japanese people are not into politics and it's not something that triggers them, what does trigger them? What is the one issue, doesn't have to be political, that would unite Japanese people into action? There must be something. Banning manga? Karaoke? I mean, I have like some ideas, but what do you think? Is there any, if you can make up any situation, what would rally, like what do you think could happen that would make the most Japanese people like get really angry?
Angry
and
にするの?
Like riot and do something. Like, you know what I'm saying? Make them do something.
なんか
Make them not say, しょうがないね. You know what I'm saying? Make everybody like, let's stand together and do something against injustice.
それこそさ、あれじゃないの？マスクをなんかつけてない人に対してなんか怒るとかじゃないの？知らんけど。結構。
Japan just shames people into wearing masks. What are you talking about?
What?
I don't think the people would be care. You know what I'm saying? The people on like if somebody's like got punished for not wearing a mask, I feel like the majority of Japanese people would be like, yeah, they should be punished. Like, shame on you for.
だから、まあそうかそうか。ちょっと待ってね。
その逆. I'm saying the majority of people will be like, this is too much. This is too much. We need to do something. We need to rebel. Okay, I'll give you my first example. So, I think Oddity is probably thinking of a youth revolution of some sort. Maybe that is. I'm thinking, bro, that's not happening. So, more realistically, I feel like something that could happen, like actually happen in the future, would be if pensions were cut.
年金ね、確かに。
If pensions were cut in Japan, which they could be because, like I said, there's going to be a very small workforce and like having a lot of the money go into the old people. I think if pensions were cut, you would start seeing, I don't even know where the protests would be or how that would look. I would love to see that.
あれで多分国会議事堂の前でなんかデモするんじゃない？知らん。
What would be their like? What would they be yelling? What would you assume?
年金。
What's your imagine?
年金。
年金だけ？
年金、なんだ。わかんない。返せ、年金欲しい。
Well, what is, obviously, so, although there isn't really a strong form of class solidarity in the US, normally when there are protests, you try to, like, establish a group of people, whether it be, like, for, like, black rights or respect, or, like I talked about, like, LGBT rights or respect, and you try to, like, form you know what I'm saying, slogans around that identity, the shared identity. In Japan, I feel like that's hard to do. Maybe it'd be around age. It'd be like, otoshi yori korosu na, nenkin fuyaso, or something.
お年寄り殺すなのどこがよくわかんないけど。
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Because if they don't have any nenkin, they can't live. You know what I'm saying? It has to be like,
そういうことか。
you're implying that the government's killing the people.
そういうことね。見殺し。
You know what I'm saying? There has to be better.
年寄り見殺し、年金。
Oh, yeah.
年金。
Dante Toshi, something.
削減反対。
No, it has to rhyme, though. We have to rhyme. We have to figure that out. Let me think. If we're talking about I think I mentioned one before, the youth, about, I think we talked about it before, where someone suggested that the old people should like off themselves so that the country could deal with remember the Yale economists? He suggested that half the population, like the older people, should like get rid of themselves, you know what I'm saying? Like off themselves so that the economy could handle it. It was like a small comment a while ago, but let me think. The youth, I mean, the thing is, they're already in the situation that maybe it's just getting worse eventually could make them want to like if a 70-hour, you know what, like let's say Japan, I think actually works less hours than the US or something, I heard, or maybe I'm mistaking that, but there's a thing where it is true, where a lot of work isn't actually documented and people don't get paid for it, which is true. But I feel like if technically speaking in the law, like companies have to pay for overtime, like over 40 hours. But maybe if there's a shift and they're like, we just don't have enough people and young people need to be working, and they did like what was it? Did China do this, or am I misremembering? Where like let's say Japan says we're actually making it so it's legal to have a 70-hour work week, and Zangyo only counts after 70. Yeah, after 40. Like if they did something that drastic, we'd have to see something, at least in Tokyo. Or I'm trying to think of one more. Like, oh, you know what? I have one. Obviously, one of the ones the most common. This is an easy one. If America preemptively, because like if Japan's military decided to get more militarized, because Abe was wanting to do that for like a point of time. If they did that, and then like the government was like, we're constructing a partnership military base in the center of Tokyo or something.
それは起こるんじゃない
Yeah, no, well, that's my point. I'm trying to think of something.
あとあれだ。
What would get people?
例えばさ、アニメを禁止するとかさ、わかんないけど、なんかがあって。
But I don't think that would actually, I don't think that actually happened though. That's the thing. I'm thinking about things that like it'd be so weird. Like, what would the basis for it be? For Japan to ban anime? Oh, you know what? But what if? Okay, maybe realistically, what if Japan decided like they got influenced by Australia and they're like, yeah, all anime is basically porn, and so.
なんで、Australia そうなの?
Well, it's a whole. We discussed it a little bit, but they're very. They basically view a lot of any sort of young character being depicted in any way that they would consider sexual to just be like almost the equivalent of pedophilia, which I do not think it is viewed that way in Japan. And what I'm saying is, if there was a move to make it so like all anime or manga couldn't show nudity, like, oh, you know what? If Japan did a porn ban, like, like Korea, there have to be enough weebs in Japan.
でも、なんだろう、結構さ、
Okay, here's what happened. Here's what happened.
あれだよ、違う。The thing is はさ、Japanese はさ、secretly perverted だからさ、あれだよ、なんていうの、they can't make an action towards it.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. It happens, like, here's what happens. The government says, porn is causing our youth to become depressed, and therefore they're not able to work, and we need them to work to support the older people. Therefore, if you're under the age of 40 or something, you are banned from watching porn. And they make it so that you have to register yourself to like access like your ID to access the internet. And they like start cracking down on people having VPN.
That's not gonna happen.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't think a lot of these will, but I mean, there's our thoughts on that, Aditi. I just thought it was a very funny or interesting question. So, the next one is a discussion about what a white hole is, and this is from both Shakox and Aditi, and I'll read both of them because I mean you're gonna have to answer my question here. I don't know what is this. Okay, we'll get to it. Let me read it first. So, it's from Shakox. We just gotta find out what a white hole is. So if black holes suck in all of everything, is a white hole a massive expunger of junk? I guess the opposite of a black hole is just an explosion. And then Aditi says, if I take the use of black hole to be more metaphoric than scientific, then I'd say it stands for an immense force of destruction. So then white hole being the opposite should mean an immense force of creation? That's my take. I mean, why do you know what a white hole is? Is a white hole a common word in Japan? Where did this concept come from? Why did you sound so surprised when I didn't know what a white hole is?
なんでだ、なんかで知ってんだよね。なんかさ、わし多分ね。
Also, what is a white hole?
だから、あれだよ。わしの理解が正しければ、ブラックホールの逆でさ、ブラックホールは全部、なんだっけ、吸収しちゃうじゃん。けど、ワイホールは全部吐き出すみたいな。で、なんか多分さ、アニメ、ドラえもんかなわかんないけど、ドラえもんかなんかのさ、結構さ、そういう、なんか宇宙系のやつとかやってたりするのかなそれでさ、確かドラえもんかどうかわかんないけど、なんかのテレビ番組で、アニメかなんかで、その
Is this actually like a scientific concept that people talk about?
そう、なんかあとね、
with like cool glasses? ホワイトホールの、
ホワイトホールの、あとね、結構私ね、テレビの結構テレビ見るの好きだったから、ちっちゃい頃とか、テレビのドキュメンタリーとか、あと、 マガジンで言うと、なんだっけ、あれだよ、ニュートンね、のサイエンスのマガジンあるじゃん。あれとかで確かね、ホワイトホールとブラックホールのなんか特集みたいにやってたんだよね。それの記憶があるんだと思う。うん。
Is this talked about in an like I might just be ignorant and same with Shawcox and Oddity, but given that Shawcox and Oddity were both experts on our our micro or chemical what do you call nutrients related biology.
本当だよ。だってさ、なんていうの
nutritional biology, is that what it is? I can't remember.
そうそうそう。
Microbiology? It's something. Then you know what I'm saying? I'm taking us all three not knowing what it is to say that Japan just made something up. And now I'm being shamed for not knowing what Japan
made something up じゃなくて実際そうなんだよこれ。
I've just never heard of, you know what I'm saying, what's his name, the pop scientist, Neil deGrasse Tyson. I've never heard him say the white hole. I've seen multiple videos on, black holes, and I've never seen them mention this concept of white hole. I got a book from my dad on black holes, which I read part of. Never saw the word white hole.
なんか、だってさ、やっぱりさ、自然科学的にはさ、なんか吸うもの、まあ、システムがあったらさ、なんか吐き出すシステムがないとダメじゃん。だって、エクスプロードしちゃうじゃん。吸ってってなったらさ。
Well, that's the, as far as I know, that's still not really understood. Because the black hole is supposed to like, okay, guys, if I'm wrong, just, forgive me. But from what I understand, that's the thing that makes a black hole confusing, is that it has, in theory, there's supposed to be a singularity point that's basically able to just keep bringing in mass at an undetermined like amount and compress it like infinitely, basically. So theoretically speaking, I think it's not understood why there's something coming out of the black hole. Does that make sense? Like I looked this up after the last episode, but from what I can understand, it's like, yeah, they can observe that things get emitted near the speed of light on the other side, sometimes of like a singularity point, but the understanding as to why that happens is not set in stone. I could be wrong, but that's what I was reading.
なんかアニメ、確かね、ブラックホールがあってすぐじゃん。で、その裏側、なんていうの、こう繋がった筒の、なんか逆側が確かホワイトホールだったっけ？ホワイトホール。
Are you talking about doing like, what's it called? Like warp holes where you have like space time, you like bend space time, and then like jump through one thing and then go to the other side?
なんかそんな感じだった気がする、そのアニメ。なんか本当にね、おぼろげなんだけどね。確かそんな感じだ。まあだからアニメとかだから全然なんか正しいとかわかんないけど、そういう記憶がある。
Excuse me, I take that as an insult.
違う。アニメは嘘しかつかないから。
I learned that was it the Hoshi ga Kagaku from Dr. Stone. I like that line. But yeah, thanks for the comments this week. That bell means we've reached the end of today's episode. Thanks for joining us, another lazy conversation towards fluency. If you have any language-related questions and are just looking for general advice, send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com and we might respond in the next episode. Also, make sure to check out our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. We'd appreciate the support. This has been Joey.
And White Hole Ayami.
Signing off.
じゃあね